I'm Frank Garza, and welcome to Here and Abroad, a podcast that follows the U.S. men's national team and their player pool across Europe, MLS, or wherever else they play their club football. On today's show, we're going to preview the USMNT's upcoming friendlies. They'll play Turkey this Saturday, June 7th, and Switzerland the following Tuesday. These games, of course, are leading up to the Gold Cup, which will kick off for the U.S. on June 15th. Joining me again today is Kyle Bond from the Sporting News. Kyle, so we have these two friendly matches coming up. Just to start, what's the biggest thing you're going to be watching for or that you're curious to see in these two matches?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting question because I think what a lot of fans were hoping to get from this competition is sort of a moot point at this stage, which is cohesion and chemistry. And because there are so many first choice players not here, some with injury, more with just being absent, that's not really possible. So, and even if it is possible, it doesn't mean as much because you don't have those guys here. So with that in mind, results. It has to be results. If you're not coming in for, going for chemistry purposes or going to trying to build cohesion, build a togetherness, whatever it might be, you're going in to win games. And I'm regardless of whether it's the Gold Cup, the actual competitive matches, the friendlies, whatever, I'm looking for results. What can Mauricio Pochettino show me? If he wants to bring these fringe players in, show me you can win with them.
So if they lose both these matches and then afterwards in the press conference, Poch says, "Oh, these were just tune-ups for the Gold Cup. The Gold Cup is what really matters." You're not buying it.
Not in the slightest. Not in the slightest. Because to be honest with you, these two games are the closest that you're going to get to World Cup competition this summer. You're looking at the two toughest games of the slate here. And if you can't get results in these two games, I'm further losing faith that will happen next summer.
Yeah.
And he has lost the ability to use the excuse of these are just tune-ups, which would be code to me for, we don't have our first choice guys, right? You chose this. You chose not to bring those guys. I don't care we talked about this last time. I don't care who had the impetus for this. You're the head coach. You accepted the decision of these players to not be here. Show me you can win without them.
Yeah. You're talking about the Pulisic, the McKennie, Weah, Reyna, which, they didn't really have a choice. But the Musas of the world, lots of players, not here for this window. What I really want to see in these two matches is I want to see, does the team look organized? And is it clear what they're doing? Because I have to be honest, I'm getting a little tired of hearing Poch talk about the effort and always talk about the culture, and whatnot. I don't think he's taken enough responsibility for himself. I mean, he's responsible for getting whatever players he brings in organized out on the field, so it looks like they're in unison. It's clear what they're trying to do, what the tactical strategy is. And to be honest, since Poch has come here, I've only seen that twice. There's this Nations League quarterfinal first half against Jamaica that we all talk about that looked like beautiful soccer for one half, right? The other time was the January camp, which really surprised me because normally those January camps look really sloppy, but I was amazed at how organized those two matches looked. And it's made me wonder if that's why he's clung on to these MLS players so much, because I don't know, do they listen to him, and the first choice guys, don't. But I want to see some organization, from this team versus what we saw in Nations League, a bunch of guys out of sync where you didn't really even know, what they were doing. Didn't look like they had much of a chance to score, very, very many goals at all.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think what you want to see is a plan, right? What is this team? How is this team going to play? What are the philosophies? What is the overarching approach? The approach that you're going to have regardless of what players are going to be there, right? Because you want a coach who's going to be malleable and who will play to the players that he has there, but also they constantly preach philosophy and culture and yada yada. All right, what is that? What is the philosophy? And I think if some coaches are the coach who will just play to whoever is in the squad, right? You think of a Jesse Marsh. Yeah, he's got his style, right? But he can change how they play based on who's there and who they're playing. Poch is a guy that has his way of playing. So let's see it. Let's see the philosophy. What is it? What are we going to do? What are we instilling in the players regardless of who's there?
Yeah. And to your point, I think winning is important as well, because we've all kind of theorized what Poch is doing by, bringing in a lot of MLS guys and leaving out traditionally who've been some of the first choice guys. And one of them is he wants to create competition, in camp for some of these spots. He wants to put those, I'll call them just the regular first choice guys under a little bit of pressure. If he can win with this team, he'll do that. But if he doesn't, then it kind of backfires, on him a little bit. So, definitely going to be looking for some W's here. Should say, since the roster was first announced, there's been 4 changes that I wanted to highlight. Patrick Schulte, DeJuan Jones, Sean Zawadski, Fuller, and Balogun are all out due to injury. Chris Brady, Nathan Harriel, Walker Zimmerman, and Paxton Aronson are all in. That Fuller and Balogun one seems like a big one to me. What were your thoughts when you saw him having to withdraw, from the camp?
I mean, just so disappointed, so disappointed, because I highlighted him as a player that needed to step up in this camp, because the roster, I mean, he's had such a struggle to perform with the national team. Forget the injuries. He's had an injury-riddled season at Monaco, but he's just not put it together on the international level. And it has to come together. And this was the chance. He's not going to have any more competitive games to perform. Now, I will say this. It's an ankle injury. It is possible that he could be back for the Gold Cup roster. I don't know the extent of the injury. I'm just kind of clinging to some kind of hope here, hoping that maybe he'll come back for the Gold Cup. This is just the roster for the friendlies. It is not the roster for the Gold Cup. They can make as many changes as they want as long as guys come in from that Gold Cup a preliminary roster. So it is possible that he could come back. But if not, I mean, when is it going to happen for this guy? That's my concern, and it's so disappointing. And again, why isn't Josh Sargent here? I understand that he's struggled, and now you're looking at Gasparini at Roma is looking at him, apparently, according to some reports. So he's getting looks at Big 5 clubs now. This would be an opportunity, and we'll see. But we'll see what happens with the Gold Cup itself. But if not, come on down, Ajimang and Wright.
Yeah. And White, did you say Wright or White or both?
Right. Haji Wright. But both, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's probably pretty low likelihood he makes it in the Gold Cup. I believe the roster is due June 4th. You and I are recording this on June 3rd. And so unless there's some miracle in the next 24 hours, I would guess he's going to be out of that too. I feel worried for him. You know, he's behind the eight ball. I mean, this was going to be. I was thinking this was going to be, you know, somewhere between 6 to 8 matches that he was going to get in camp with Pochettino, getting to know him and the staff. He didn't have a whole lot of competition. Now I'm hesitating to say that. I mean, I guess when you look on paper, he shouldn't have much competition. You know, he would have had a chance to really solidify his role with the team. I think he's going to be behind the eight ball, even making it into this team now. It's gonna strictly go to his club performance in Europe, because there's only going to be 2 match windows from here on out, and so for him to like win a spot and get a lot of playing time, it's going to be tough unless he's just absolutely tearing it up in Europe during the club season, and Poch decides to give him, you know, a start, you know, in one of the, you know, fall friendlies or something like that. Where I want to go next is let's start to look at some starting lineup projections, okay? Because a lot of new players, a lot of regulars not here. What I'd like to do, Kyle, is I put together what I think Poch is going to go out with, okay? And I'm gonna share that with you. I'm going to defend my answers a little bit, and then I'm just going to let you run wild. Okay, just tearing me up. Just tearing me up on it.
That sounds good. Let's see it.
Okay, so for those of you who are watching this, you can see my screen here. For those who are just listening, I'll talk you through it. So I'll start in the back. I'm going Matt Turner in goal. I really, really would like to see somebody else, and I think possibly maybe Matt Turner will get one start in one of the friendlies. Somebody else will get the other. I would have put Zach Steffen here over Matt Turner because I thought he's done enough, but he's been injured, hasn't played in a couple weeks, and so I just don't see him, even though he's in camp and I saw he was practicing, I just don't see him getting the start, you know, in the first friendly. And I don't know, maybe he goes with a Matt Freese, who appears to be next on the pecking order since Chris Brady was the goalkeeper that was brought in as a replacement for Schulte. We'll see, but he started Turner, I think, every match. I'm going to just stick with Turner until he shows me otherwise. Center backs. I should mention, I'm just kind of going with the 4-2-3-1 here, which what we normally see, you know, from Poch. So center backs, I'm going with Tim Ream and Chris Richards. You know, Kyle, eat your heart out there with the Tim Ream, but again, until he shows me something different, I'm gonna keep putting Tim Ream in there. I probably would rather see Mark McKenzie and Chris Richards in there, but if I'm predicting what Poch is going to do, I'm gonna stick with Tim Ream and Chris Richards. I'm gonna go with Max Arfston as my left back, Serginho Dest as my right back. I think this one was pretty straightforward. I don't know if he's going to go with a new guy into camp in the starting lineup, you know, for the first match, even though I guess that would be Serginho Dest for him. I think, as far as the midfield, Tyler Adams and Johnny Cardoso kind of being those two holding midfielders, I think is pretty straightforward. I'd be surprised if he goes somewhere other than that. But here's where it got complicated to me, is how he's going to run the front line. You know, the three and then the one striker. I think Diego Luna's done enough, and I think he could be the long-term answer as that like central number 10, that I'd like to leave him in that role. But you could put a number of other guys there. You could put Diego Luna on one of the wings, but I'm going to leave him in that central number 10. I want to get Malik Tillman on the field, even though I know the wing isn't maybe his best spot. He's played there plenty of times, so I'm going to stick him on the left. Right wing, I really struggled because we don't really have, I don't believe, somebody whose natural position on this roster is playing on the right wing. And so I stuck Brennan Aronson in there only because I was like, I'm going to get him on the field. If nothing else, he can press and his work rate will help us out. So I'm going to stick him up there for now. And then I think striker comes down between Patrick Agyemang and Brian White. And I would have been leaning towards Brian White because he's just been doing so well at MLS, and Agyemang got off to a slow start. But Ajiman's been scoring some goals, these last couple weeks. He seems to be heating up. He's already kind of proved to Pochettino that he can score. And so I think Poch is going to have Ajiman a little bit higher on the depth chart than a Brian White. What do you think?
I think there's a lot of questions about. I shouldn't say a lot. There are a couple questions about where Pochettino sees certain players that I need to know before I can really do this, but I will give you where I think there might be some changes. I fully agree at the back. I hate the Tim Ream start, but I think you're right. I completely agree with you that I think Mark McKenzie is the deserving partner to Chris Richards here right now, but we are where we are. Fullbacks, I think you've got it. The midfield, I think you've got it. Adams and Cardoso are the two pair there. The only question here is, I agree. I think the 4-2-3-1 is the way that he'll go, but he could go 4-3-3. Now, it's not that much of a difference. It's really kind of the same. But often in a 4-3-3, you don't have a 10. And that's the only difference, is that you would add a midfielder and remove a 10. And so I wonder if maybe Jack McGlynn would get the start there if he goes more of a 4-3-3 rather than Luna. You are entirely correct that they are all left-sided players on this roster and almost no right-sided players. And that makes it difficult. I would personally see Malik Tillman at the 10. I agree with you that Pochettino has shown a liking to Diego Luna. I shy away from that only because we thought he had a liking to Tanner Tessman and then he left him off the roster. So I don't know how much that will actually play into it. I think he'll put Tillman at the 10 and Haji Wright on the left. Now, because I think Haji Wright deserves to be in there from his club performances. I wonder if you will eventually see, this will be different from the friendlies to the actual Gold Cup. Because I wonder if factoring into this would be Alejandro Zendejas as well, since LAFC got the Club World Cup spot, that Zendejas could play in on the right. If he gets added, we'll see.
Yeah, I was surprised he didn't get added, with this with all these latest changes.
Yes, yeah. That may be, the end of the road, but we'll see. Those would be the only changes I have, or if he decides to put Haji Wright up top. That's kind of the big question here. Is Greg Berhalter was public about the idea that they as a staff saw Haji Wright as a winger, not as a striker. I don't know if that's a U.S. soccer thing or if that was a Greg Berhalter thing. So we'll have to see where Pochettino thinks that Haji Wright is best, because I think a lot of fans were curious about that. And I wouldn't say in disagreement, but maybe had questions about it because he is a good striker and the team is in need of a striker. But I think if he ends up on the left, you would put Tillman at the 10 and Diego Luna is the one who comes out. Now, you could put Diego Luna on the right. He doesn't play on the right, but if you really want to put him in there, that would be the hole where you go, all right, Brendan, you haven't really earned this spot. Instead of forcing a player into the lineup that we don't think is the best players on the field, we'll move a guy to the opposite wing and see how it goes. You could put Tillman at the 10, Luna on the right, and Haji on the left. That would be something that Pochettino would have to explore in training and see if he can do it or see if he has the skill set. I don't know. Brendan is a good choice because he's a more defensive, high work rate guy who you pair with Sergiño Dest, and Dest becomes the de facto winger on the overlap. So Aronson does fit that tactical setup with Dest being an attacking right back. So I certainly could see where your lineup plays into this. Honestly, those are the only changes I think I would make here, is I would put Tillman at the 10 and Wright on the left. And then if you really want Diego Luna in the lineup, you put him on the right. But I don't think Poch will do that. I think you put Aronson on the right because he fits with Dest.
Yeah. I mean, that is, when this lineup comes out, before the match, that's one of the first things I'm going to look at. Well, I mean, it might not be obvious when the lineup comes out. We might have to wait till they take the field.
Yep.
But who does go on that right wing? And I even wonder if Sergiño Dest is an option at all for that. I mean, I've wondered if Poch would consider playing Sergiño like further up. I don't know. Maybe primetime Sergiño Dest, who's like a year back from like injury and like showing that he still has the same flash. You'd be willing to do that? Now he's still a little, I don't know.
I'll tell you why there's no chance of that happening, and it's because Joe Scally's not on the roster.
That's true. I have always thought about that with Joe Scally like behind him. But I guess you'd end up then with probably Alexander Freeman behind him. And so that might be a lot to ask for that guy, right away. So yeah, there's going to be some interesting decisions. I think goalkeeper, who he puts out there for goalkeeper is an interesting decision that we're not sure of. Who's the center back pairing, and then what he does with the front line. I mean, when I look at this lineup, when you look at just goalkeeper, the back line, defensive midfielders, that's pretty close to what we might consider a first choice lineup. You could argue a few guys in or out, but no, Max Arfston, no. I mean, obviously, you throw Anthony Robinson in there, that's the big glaring difference. But other than that, defensively, you would think this team should be pretty solid. Even though I guess they're not. Even though they're not when the first choice is out there, but there's a lot of new guys on the defensive half of the pitch. But when you look at the front line, I'm wondering where are the goals going to come from? That's what I think is going to be the biggest challenge of this team, is who's going to score the goals. And
it's got to be Ajamang, right? And the creation comes from Luna and Tillman.
Exactly.
Aronson is a guy who you hope can cause havoc, and create turnovers in the attacking third. But the creation comes from Tillman and Luna. And I think that's the hope here, because if they can't do it, now you're looking further down the depth chart, and that's a problem.
Yeah. If somebody does score, if there's a striker that comes out and scores the goals, in these friendlies in the upcoming Gold Cup and gets on a run, whether it's Ajimon, whether it's Brian White, whether it's Damian Downs, if one of them is able to do that, they're going to put themselves in a really, really good position, going forward, as we move towards the World Cup. So it's an unbelievable opportunity, for one of those guys. We'll see if they can do something with it. Okay. So last thing I want to kind of talk about is the two opponents we're going to play, Turkey and Switzerland, and get your thoughts on those two teams. I'll just review a few things before we do that. I always just like to kind of look at the ELO rankings and FIFA rankings to see where we compare to the teams. If you look at the ELO rankings, Turkey's 18, Switzerland's 24, US is 41. So that tells you that ELO thinks those two teams are marginally better, than the US. FIFA rankings, US is 16, Switzerland 20, Turkey 27. So I guess they're the complete opposite order. And then another data point, if you look at how Switzerland and Turkey performed in the Euros in 2024, so only a year ago, Switzerland made it to the quarterfinal and lost to England on penalties. Turkey made it to the quarterfinal, lost to the Netherlands. So, I mean, these are two top 8 European clubs, two very good clubs. I mean, what are you expecting from these two teams, or what do you think is important for fans to know?
Yeah, I think there's two things that the U.S. needs to show in these two games that will hopefully show they can compete at a major international level. And they need to show physicality, especially against Turkey. It's a very physical team. You look up and down the roster, you see a lot of players who, can impose themselves physically, and a few who can't. I'm thinking about a guy like Arda Güler, who should start, I would expect, and has been bullied in the past. He is the biggest criticism with Arda Güler. They're looking for his best position at Real Madrid right now. I got to watch him in person when I was in Spain, and Carlo Ancelotti has been trying him at the 8 rather than on the wing. He's played on the wing. He's played at the 10. Ancelotti, and I think a lot of Real Madrid folks see him as an 8 long-term, like an 8-10 guy. He got bullied off the ball a lot. And if the U.S. can stick with the guys who are physical and then impose themselves on somebody like Güler, like Kenan Yildiz, who's also 20 and maybe a little undersized, then they can perform in that game. The biggest thing for me across both of these teams, especially with Switzerland, but both teams to an extent, is can they cause chaos against teams that are proficient at killing off time on the ball? Switzerland especially, but both of these teams are inert possessional teams. They like to slow the game down. They like to use possession as a defensive mechanism and are good at it. You look at a guy like Granit Xhaka in midfield for Switzerland, and he is just a passing wizard in the sense that he will field marshal possession in a way that they're not going to lose the ball. Can we get the ball off of them? Can the U.S. create chaos against a team where they're not going to be sitting back and defending, but they aren't going to have the ball? So can they press forward? Can they create pressure? Can they cause turnovers? Can they avoid sitting back, right? That's the thing you want to avoid the most doing against a team like that is letting them have the ball and sagging back into a mid block and just allowing the other team to lull you to sleep or in the very least kill off large stretches of the game. It needs to be up tempo, and that's difficult against teams like this. You look at the Switzerland roster. You have a guy like Manuel Akanji who has been in a high passing, high possession system for a long time at Manchester City and is good at it. You have Granit Xhaka. You have a lot of other guys on that team, Breel Mbolo, who is very press resistant. And Mbolo is good. I was hoping that we would get a chance for Fuller and Balogun to show his club back at Monaco, hey, I can compete against this guy and maybe should earn a spot, because Mbolo has done nothing but solidify his position as the starting striker at Monaco. Can you get the ball off this team? And I don't know if they can. I am watching at this tournament in general, but especially in these two friendlies, Johnny Cardoso. I need to see Johnny Cardoso translate his club form to international form because we haven't seen it yet. He had his best season at the club form this year and may have earned a move to Atletico Madrid, which I'm a little nervous about. But we haven't seen it at the national team level. And if there's going to be any two games for a defensive midfielder to cause havoc and get himself stuck in, it's going to be these two games.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how Tyler Adams and Johnny Cardoso work together. I think that's a pairing a lot of us have wanted to see. I don't know if we've even seen it yet, because
No,
one of them
because in
is
the
always out.
4-3-3, you would never play those two guys together.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, you would think that those two guys, if they could get some chemistry, could really be something special as you kind of move along through the friendlies and the Gold Cup, and help us out. I mean, do you think is it fair to say that the U.S. is considered an underdog against both Turkey and Switzerland, or is it more of a
100%.
toss-up? 100%. Okay. Okay. So, yeah, very challenging matches these are going to be, especially without maybe your preferred first choice lineup. Being like we said, we're going to be missing a lot of guys. But here we go. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. Kyle, thanks again for joining the show. We'll wrap it up there. I'll make sure and put links in the show notes to your X account, which is @the_bonfire, and also to your work at the Sporting News. Thanks again, and enjoy the upcoming matches.
Thank you. It should be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
And thanks to everyone for listening to Here and Abroad. If you enjoyed the episode, please do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, or that follow button if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or somewhere else. Thank you so much. I'm Frank Garza. You can follow me on X @FrankGarza007, and I'll be back next week with a new episode.